Ever feel like you're on a treadmill? Always pushing for more, better, faster.
Yeah.
Even when you achieve something, there's that nagging voice saying it's not enough.
Right.
That's hustle culture for you. But what if there's a different way? A way to get off the treadmill without, giving up on your goals?
A lot of us are asking that question. Thankfully, there are some fresh perspectives out there.
Exactly. And that's why we're diving into Leena Norms' book, Half-Arse Human, today.
I like that.
I mean, even the title, right? It's a breath of fresh air in a world obsessed with optimization.
Yeah.
It's like she's giving us permission to, step off the hamster wheel.
It is.
I don't know about you, but that sounds pretty tempting to me.
It's an intriguing concept for sure.
Right.
Especially when so much self-help advice is about maximizing,
Yes.
productivity and squeezing every last drop out of our day.
Right. But Norms isn't saying we should all become slackers or anything.
No.
It's more nuanced than that. So help us unpack this half-arse approach. What exactly does she mean by that?
Well, she argues that a lot of us are chasing this perfection in every area of our lives. And that can actually be counterproductive.
Okay.
Think about, how often does that pressure to be perfect lead to procrastination, anxiety, or just feeling totally overwhelmed?
Yeah.
So Norm says, instead of aiming for perfect, we should aim for well enough.
That's interesting because on the surface it sounds almost radical,
Yeah.
We're so conditioned to strive for the best.
To go above and beyond.
Yeah.
But Norms points out that this constant striving can actually lead to burnout.
Right.
It's like running a marathon at full speed without stopping to catch your breath.
And it's not just work, is it? This applies to everything. Relationships, parenting, even hobbies.
Absolutely. You might find yourself, I don't know, spending hours trying to craft the perfect social media post.
Oh, yeah.
Or agonizing over every detail of a dinner party. When really, what matters most is the connection, the enjoyment,
Right.
not the flawless execution.
Yeah.
So Norms argues that embracing well enough can actually free up our time and energy so we can focus on the things that really matter.
So I'm starting to see how this half-arse approach isn't about being lazy or doing
Right.
shoddy work. It's more like a mindset shift.
Precisely.
Yeah.
It's about recognizing that our worth isn't tied to achieving some impossible standard of perfection.
Right.
It's about giving ourselves permission to be human, flaws and all.
That makes a lot of sense. So how do we actually put this into practice?
Right.
Because it's one thing to say embrace imperfection. It's another to actually do it, in a world that's constantly telling us to do more, be more, achieve more.
Right. Well, one of the key things Norms emphasizes is the importance of setting boundaries.
Okay.
And she's not talking about building walls to shut people out or anything.
No.
It's more about recognizing our limits
Okay.
and communicating them clearly.
Yeah. I can see how that ties into the whole half-arse approach.
Yeah.
It's about saying, this is what I'm willing to do, and this is where I draw the line.
Exactly. And it's not selfish.
Right.
It's an act of self-respect. Because when we constantly overextend ourselves, we end up feeling, resentful,
Yeah.
burnt out,
Yeah.
and ultimately unable to show up as our best selves for anyone.
Right.
Norms points out that setting boundaries is a way to protect our energy
Yeah.
and time
Yeah.
so we can invest them in the things that truly matter.
You know what? I actually recently started setting boundaries in my own life.
Very good for you.
And it's been a game changer.
Yeah.
For years, I felt like I had to say yes to every request, every opportunity.
Right.
Even if it meant sacrificing my own well-being.
Oh, yeah.
It was exhausting.
It is.
But when I started saying no
Yeah.
to things that, didn't align with my priorities or
Right.
that felt draining,
Yeah.
I was amazed at how much space and energy I reclaimed.
That's so powerful. It reminds me of something Norms writes about.
Mm.
Even micro moments of self-care can actually interrupt the stress cycle, preventing it from building into, full-blown burnout.
Right.
It's not about grand gestures.
Right.
It's about those small, consistent acts of replenishing ourselves.
That's a really important point because so often self-care is portrayed as, these elaborate spa days or expensive retreats.
Oh, yeah.
But Norms is saying it can be as simple as taking 5 minutes to breathe deeply.
Exactly.
Or listening to your favorite song or going for a walk.
Right. And it's not selfish. It's like putting on your own oxygen mask on a plane before helping others.
Right.
You can't pour from an empty cup.
Yeah.
Norms really debunks the myth that self-care is indulgent.
Yeah.
She frames it as essential maintenance for our physical and mental well-being.
Right.
And that's something I think a lot of us need to hear.
Definitely resonates with me. I think with a lot of people listening too. We're so conditioned to put ourselves last, to prioritize everyone else's needs
Oh, for sure.
before our own.
Yeah.
But Norms is saying that's not sustainable in the long run.
And it's not just about sustainability.
Right.
It's about living a more joyful and fulfilling life.
Right.
When we take care of ourselves, we have more energy, more enthusiasm
Yeah.
to bring to our relationships, our work, everything we do.
So true. So we've talked about embracing imperfection
Yeah.
and setting boundaries.
Yes.
What else does Norms highlight as kind of essential to this half-arse approach?
Well, she dives deep into this concept of burnout, which I think is so relevant in today's always-on culture, and you might be feeling this yourself.
Yeah.
That constant pressure to be on, to be productive, to be achieving.
Yeah.
And Norms helps us understand that burnout doesn't just happen overnight. It's often a slow, insidious process.
I'm curious to hear more about that. What are some of the early warning signs of burnout?
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. Because I think a lot of us might be experiencing them without even realizing it.
Absolutely. She talks about things like exhaustion, cynicism, decreased enjoyment in things you used to love,
Well, yeah.
difficulty concentrating, feeling increasingly overwhelmed. It's like a slow leak in your energy reserves.
Right.
You might not even realize it's happening until you're running on fumes.
That's a great analogy. It makes me think about how, so often we're encouraged to just push through those feelings,
Right.
to power through the exhaustion.
Yeah,
But Norms is saying that's a recipe for disaster.
exactly. She emphasizes the importance of self-awareness, paying attention to those early warning signs,
Yeah.
and taking steps to prevent burnout before it reaches a crisis point.
So what are some practical things we can do to manage stress and prevent burnout?
Well, in addition to the things we've already talked about, setting boundaries, prioritizing self-care,
Right.
Norms also talks about the importance of simplifying our lives.
Mm.
We often take on too much, overcommit ourselves, try to do it all,
Yeah.
and that could lead to feeling overwhelmed and stressed.
So it's about being more mindful of
Yeah.
our commitments
Yeah.
and learning to say no to things that don't truly align with our priorities.
Precisely. And it's about recognizing that it's okay to let go of some things.
Yeah.
We don't have to be perfect in every area of our lives. We don't have to do it all.
When you put it that way, it sounds so simple.
Right.
But I think for a lot of us, it's a really challenging concept to embrace.
Yeah.
We're so used to striving, to pushing ourselves, to constantly doing more.
It is definitely a shift in mindset, and it takes conscious effort.
Right.
But the rewards could be immense.
Yeah.
When we let go of that need to do it all, we create space for more joy, more ease, more fulfillment in our lives.
And that's ultimately what Half-Arse Human is all about, right? It's not about doing less or being lazy. It's about creating a life that feels good, a life that's sustainable, a life that allows us to show up as our best selves, flaws and all.
Well said. Now, there's another piece of this half-arse approach that I think we should delve into.
Okay.
Norm's perspective on time management.
Okay.
She has some really interesting insights that challenge the conventional wisdom of productivity hacks
Yeah.
and constant optimization.
I'm all ears. Because I think a lot of us struggle with feeling like there's never enough time,
Right.
that we're always behind, always rushing.
Oh, for sure.
So what's Norm's take on time management?
She starts by encouraging us to let go of the idea that we have to be constantly productive. She reminds us that we're humans, not machines,
Right.
and that rest and downtime are essential for our well-being and creativity.
That's a great reminder. So often we feel guilty for taking breaks. Like we should always be doing something productive.
Yeah. And that guilt can actually make us less productive in the long run.
Right.
When we're constantly pushing ourselves, we're more likely to make mistakes,
Yeah.
feel burnt out,
Yeah.
and ultimately get less done.
So what does a half-arse approach to time management look like in practice? Does Norms offer any practical tips or strategies?
Absolutely. She emphasizes the importance of prioritization, of identifying what truly matters to us
Okay.
and focusing our energy on those things.
Right.
She also encourages us to create realistic to-do lists,
Okay.
to break down large tasks into smaller, more manageable chunks,
Right.
and to schedule time for both work and rest.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
So it's not about trying to cram more into our day. It's about being more intentional with how we spend our time and energy.
Precisely. And it's about recognizing that it's okay to have some unscheduled time, some time for spontaneity and rest.
What's really striking me about this half-arse approach is that it's not just about doing things differently.
Yeah.
It's about fundamentally shifting our mindset, our relationship with ourselves, and our definition of success.
That's a great observation.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's one of the most powerful aspects of Norm's work.
Yeah.
She's inviting us to step off the treadmill of constant striving.
Right.
And to create a life that's more aligned with our values, our needs,
Yeah.
and our own unique definition of success.
And that's a pretty exciting prospect, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. Now, I know we've only just scratched the surface of Half-Arse Human,
Right.
and there's so much more to explore.
Yeah.
But before we continue, I'd love to get your take on what we've covered so far. What's resonating with you the most?
Honestly, everything we've discussed is hitting home for me. But I think what's really standing out is this idea of giving ourselves permission to be imperfect,
Yeah.
to let go of the need to have it all figured out,
Right.
and to just be okay with where we are right now.
That's a powerful takeaway.
Yeah.
And it's something that I think a lot of us need to hear. It's a reminder that we're all works in progress, and that's okay.
Absolutely. And I love that Norms emphasizes that this half-arse approach isn't about lowering our standards or settling for mediocrity.
No.
It's about finding a more sustainable and joyful way to live our lives,
Right.
a way that honors our limits and celebrates our unique strengths.
Beautifully said. And it's not a destination, it's a journey.
So true. Now, I'm eager to dive deeper into Half-Arse Human.
Yeah.
I know there's so much more we can unpack.
Yeah.
But before we do, let's take a moment to kind of let all of this sink in.
Right.
Think about what we've discussed so far. What resonates with you the most? What are you curious to explore further? And we'll be back in a moment to continue our deep dive into Half-Arse Human.
Sound good.
Yeah.
You know, as we were talking about burnout before,
Yeah?
it struck me that one of the most insidious things about hustle culture is that it can disconnect us from ourselves.
That's an interesting point. Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Well, think about it. When you're constantly in like go mode,
Yeah.
always striving, always push, when do you have time to just be,
Right?
to reflect, to connect with your inner voice?
Right.
You're so focused on external achievements and validation
Yeah.
that you lose touch with what truly matters to you,
Right.
what brings you joy, what your values are.
That makes so much sense. It's like we're so busy chasing someone else's definition of success that we forget to ask ourselves what success actually means to us.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's where Norm's emphasis on reconnecting with ourselves comes in.
Okay.
She argues that self-reflection is crucial
Yeah.
for living a more intentional and fulfilling life.
Right.
It's about taking the time to check in with yourself,
Okay.
to understand your needs, your desires, your values,
Right.
and then making choices that align with those things.
So it's not just about slowing down and setting boundaries.
Right.
It's about going deeper, about getting to know ourselves on a more fundamental level.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be complicated.
Right.
Norms suggest simple practices like journaling, meditation, or even just taking a few minutes each day to sit quietly and reflect.
Yeah.
It's about creating space for stillness amidst the chaos of daily life.
You know, I've been trying to incorporate more mindfulness into my own life lately.
Good for you.
And it's amazing. I mean, it's really helped me to connect with myself
Yeah.
and to make more conscious choices.
It's amazing how even just a few minutes of mindful breathing
Yeah.
can shift your perspective
Right.
and bring you back to the present moment.
Absolutely. And it's not just about feeling calmer or less stressed.
Right.
It's about gaining clarity about what I really want,
Yeah.
what's truly important to me, and
Yeah.
what steps I need to take to create the life I desire.
And that's where the real power of self-reflection lies. It's not just about, feeling good.
Right.
It's about making choices that align with our values
Yeah.
and lead us toward a more fulfilling life.
So how does Norm suggest we approach this process of reconnecting with ourselves? Are there any specific questions she encourages us to ask ourselves?
She has a whole chapter dedicated to this.
Okay.
And she offers a lot of great prompts for self-reflection.
Right.
One of the things she encourages us to do
Yeah.
is to identify our core values.
Okay.
These are the guiding principles that shape our beliefs, our choices,
Right.
and ultimately our lives.
That's such a powerful exercise because once you know your core values, you can start to make decisions that are in alignment with them.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's like having a compass that guides you toward a life that feels authentic
Right.
and meaningful.
Right. Right. And I imagine this process can also help us to identify areas where we might be out of alignment with our values, where we might be making choices that are like draining us
Right.
or leading us away from the life we want.
Absolutely. It's about becoming more self-aware,
Yeah.
more conscious of our patterns and habits, so we can make choices that support our well-being
Yeah.
and our goals.
You know, as we're talking about this, I'm realizing that this whole half-arse approach is really about more than just doing things differently.
Yeah.
It's about questioning the underlying beliefs and assumptions that drive our behavior.
That's a brilliant insight.
Mm-hmm.
Norms is challenging us to question those societal messages we've internalized
Right.
about success, productivity, worthiness.
It's like we've been programmed to believe that our value is tied to how much we do,
Right.
how much we achieve, how busy we are.
Exactly.
And that can be incredibly exhausting and ultimately unfulfilling.
It's a recipe for burnout and unhappiness.
Yeah.
And it often leads us to make choices that aren't in our best interest, choices that sacrifice our health, our relationships,
Right.
our own sense of well-being.
So how do we break free from this programming, from this hustle mentality that's so ingrained in our culture?
Well, like we've been talking about, it starts with awareness.
Okay.
Norms encourages us to take a step back
Oh.
and examine the messages we're receiving from society, from the media,
Yeah.
from our families,
Right.
and to ask ourselves whether those messages are serving us.
So it's about becoming more critical of the stories we're telling ourselves.
Yeah.
The stories that we've been told about what it means to be successful, what it means to be worthy.
Precisely. And it's about rewriting those stories,
Yeah.
about creating a new narrative
Right.
that's based on our own values, our own definition of success, our own unique path.
That's so empowering. And it's a reminder that we have the power to choose what we believe,
Yeah,
what we value, and how we want to live our lives.
absolutely. We're not just passive recipients of societal programming.
Right.
We have agency, we have choice, and we have the power to create a life that feels authentic
Yeah.
and aligned with our true selves.
And that brings us back to Norm's critique of hustle culture.
Right.
This always-on mentality that tells us we need to be constantly working, hustling, grinding
Right?
to achieve something worthwhile.
It's a myth that's perpetuated by a lot of the self-help industry,
Yeah.
by social media, even by our own inner critic.
Right.
But Norms is saying, hold on a minute. There's a different way.
Right.
You don't have to buy into this narrative. You can choose to create a life that's more balanced, more joyful, and more aligned with your values.
I love that. And I think it's a message that's really resonating with people.
Yeah.
You know, there's a growing movement of people who are pushing back against hustle culture
Right.
and embracing a more mindful and intentional way of living.
And it's not about being lazy or unproductive.
Right.
It's about working smarter, not harder.
Right.
It's about recognizing that rest and rejuvenation are essential for creativity, for productivity,
Yeah.
for overall well-being.
It's about finding a sustainable pace
Yes.
that allows us to thrive both personally and professionally.
Right.
And ultimately, it's about creating a life that feels good, a life that brings us joy,
Yeah.
and a life that allows us to show up as our best selves. Now, one thing that Norms talks about that I think is really helpful in this process of rejecting hustle culture
Yeah.
is the idea of creating a ta-da list.
Ooh, I like that.
A ta-da list. I've never heard of that before. What is that?
It's basically the opposite of a to-do list.
Okay.
Instead of focusing on all the things you haven't done yet, you write down all the things you've already accomplished.
Oh, I love that.
Big or small.
Yeah. It's a way to celebrate our wins and acknowledge our progress, rather than constantly focusing on what's still left to do.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's a great way to shift our perspective from a place of scarcity and lack to a place of abundance and gratitude.
And it can be a real mood booster, especially on those days when we're feeling overwhelmed or discouraged.
It's like giving yourself a pat on the back and saying, hey, I'm doing good. I'm making progress. I'm enough.
And I think that's such an important message to internalize,
It is.
especially in a culture that's constantly telling us we need to do more, be more, achieve more.
It's a reminder that we're already enough, just as we are, and that we don't need to prove our worth through, endless striving and achievement.
That's so powerful, and I think it ties in beautifully with Norm's emphasis on finding joy in the everyday moments.
Absolutely. She encourages us to create a joy list,
Yeah.
a list of activities that bring us pleasure no matter how big or small.
Things like taking a walk in nature, listening to our favorite music, spending time with loved ones, reading a good book, having a cup of tea, all those simple things that bring a smile to our faces
Yeah.
and nourish our souls.
Exactly. And the idea is to refer to this list when we're feeling stressed, depleted, or just in need of a little boost.
Right.
It's a reminder to prioritize the things that bring us joy, to make time for the activities that make us feel alive.
I love that. It's like a prescription for happiness.
And it's a way to break free from the hustle mentality, from the belief that we have to constantly be working or achieving to be worthy.
So it's not just about doing things differently, it's about reconnecting with our own sense of joy. Yes.
With the things that make us feel alive and fulfilled.
Beautifully said. Now, another practical tip that Norms offers, and one that I found incredibly helpful in my own life, is the Pomodoro technique.
Okay.
Have you ever heard that?
I have, yeah. It's a time management technique where you work in focus bursts, right?
Exactly. You set a timer for 25 minutes, and you work on one task without distractions.
Right.
Then you take a 5-minute break,
Okay.
and after 4 Pomodoros, you take a longer break of 20-30 minutes.
I've tried it before, and I found it really effective for staying focused and getting things done. But what I love about it is that it also incorporates like built-in breaks, which are essential for preventing burnout
Yeah.
and maintaining focus over the long term.
Our brains simply aren't wired to work for hours on end without a break.
Right.
We need those moments of rest and rejuvenation to recharge our batteries
Right.
and come back to our work with fresh eyes.
And those breaks don't have to be elaborate or time-consuming.
Norms suggest things like stretching, walking around, listening to music, or simply closing your eyes and taking a few deep breaths.
Right. It's about giving your mind a chance to relax and reset.
Right.
So you can come back to your work feeling refreshed and focused.
And I think this ties in beautifully with the whole half-arse approach.
Yeah.
It's about working smarter, not harder.
And it's about recognizing that rest is just as important as work when it comes to achieving our goals and living a fulfilling life.
So it's about finding that balance, that sweet spot,
Yes.
where we're able to be productive and focused without sacrificing our well-being or our joy.
Precisely. And it's about giving ourselves permission to rest, to recharge, to simply be.
Now, I'm curious to hear more about your personal experience with the half-arse approach. You mentioned earlier that you've incorporated some of Norm's ideas into your own life.
Yeah.
What's been the biggest impact for you?
You know, one of the most significant changes for me has been around setting boundaries. I used to be a chronic people pleaser, always saying yes to every request, even if it meant, overextending myself and feeling resentful.
Right.
But as I started reading Half-Arse Human and reflecting on Norm's message,
Yeah.
I realized that setting boundaries wasn't selfish.
Right.
It was actually an act of self-respect. It
Mm.
was about honoring my own needs and limits
Right.
and communicating those clearly to others.
I can relate to that. It's so easy to fall into the trap of feeling like we have to say yes to everything,
Oh, yes.
especially when it comes to work or helping others.
Right.
But learning to say no gracefully and without guilt has been a game changer for me.
It's about recognizing that our time and energy are valuable resources, and we have the right to choose how we spend them.
And it's about understanding that saying no to one thing often means saying yes to something else that's more important to us.
Exactly. And, what's really interesting is that as I've started setting more boundaries, I've actually found that I'm more productive, more creative, and more present in the things that I do choose to say yes to.
That makes sense. When we're not constantly feeling depleted and overextended,
Right.
we have more energy and enthusiasm to bring to the things that truly matter.
Absolutely. And it's not just about work, it's about every area of our lives.
Right.
When we set boundaries, we create more space for the things that bring us joy, for the relationships that nourish us, and for the activities that make us feel alive.
And I think that's one of the most powerful messages of Half-Arse Human.
Yeah.
It's about creating a life that feels good, a life that's aligned with our values,
Yeah.
and a life that allows us to show up as our best selves, flaws and all.
Well said. Now, before we move on to the final part of our deep dive,
Okay.
I'd love to hear what's resonating with you the most
Yeah.
from what we've discussed so far. What's standing out for you?
It's hard to choose just one thing because everything we've talked about is so relevant and insightful.
It is.
But I think what's really sticking with me is this idea of questioning the narrative of hustle culture.
Yeah.
This belief that we have to constantly be striving and achieving to be worthy. Norm's message is so liberating, so empowering.
Yeah.
She's giving us permission to redefine success on our own terms,
Right.
to create a life that feels authentic and meaningful to us, and to embrace our own unique journey.
That's a beautiful takeaway. And it's something that I think a lot of us need to hear. It's a reminder that we don't have to buy into the hype, that we can choose to create a life that's more balanced, more joyful, and more aligned with our values.
Absolutely. Now, I'm eager to hear what else Norms has to say about this half-arse approach and how we can apply it to our lives. But before we continue, I'd like to invite you, our listeners, to take a moment to reflect on what we've discussed so far.
Right.
What's resonating with you the most? What are you curious to explore further?
And we'll be back in a moment to continue our deep dive into Half-Arse Human.
Welcome back to our deep dive into Half-Arse Human. As we wrap up, I keep coming back to this idea of redefining success.
Yeah, it's a big one.
We've touched on it throughout the episode.
We have.
But I think it's worth circling back to it.
Definitely.
As we consider how to actually, integrate this half-arse approach into our lives.
It's so crucial because so often we're just operating on autopilot, chasing these goals and achievements that we haven't even consciously chosen. We're climbing ladders that might not even lead to where we truly want to go.
Makes me think of that quote. It's better to be at the bottom of the ladder you want to climb than halfway up the wrong one.
Exactly. And Norms really challenges us to examine our own definition of success.
Right.
Like, what does a truly fulfilling life look like to you?
Yeah.
And it might be drastically different from what society's telling us.
Right.
It might involve prioritizing time with loved ones, creative pursuits, community involvement, or simply just having more moments of peace and presence in our daily lives.
It's about aligning our actions with our values, not with some external measure of success that might not even resonate with us.
Right.
And I think for a lot of us, that requires a pretty radical shift in perspective.
It does. It requires us to challenge those deep-seated beliefs we've internalized about what it means to be worthy, to be successful.
Right. But the rewards can be huge, though, right?
Oh, yeah.
When we start living in alignment with our values, we tap into this wellspring of energy and motivation that comes from within.
It does.
It's not about chasing external validation anymore.
Right.
It's about living a life that feels authentic and meaningful to us.
It's interesting because Norms argues that when we let go of that need to constantly strive and prove ourselves, we often find that we're actually more productive, more creative, and more fulfilled in our work.
That's kind of counterintuitive, isn't it?
It is.
You'd think that, constantly pushing ourselves would lead to better results.
Right, you would.
But she's saying that sometimes the opposite is true.
She is. She points out that when we're constantly in that go mode, our nervous systems are just overloaded.
Right.
And that can lead to burnout.
Right.
Decreased creativity.
Right.
And ultimately less effective work.
Right.
But when we create space for rest, reflection, self-care, that's when the magic happens.
I want to hear a little bit more about what Norm says about the connection between the half-arse approach and creativity.
Okay.
Because I think for a lot of, especially creative people, there's this pressure to be constantly churning out new work.
Right.
To be constantly innovating.
There is.
So what does she have to say about that?
Well, she argues that true creativity often comes from a place of stillness, from allowing our minds to wander, to make connections, to explore new ideas without judgment. And that's where the half-arse approach comes in. It's about creating space for those moments of quiet reflection, for non-doing, where our creative juices can really flow.
So it's not about forcing creativity. It's about creating the conditions for it to kind of emerge naturally.
Exactly. And it's about trusting the process. Trusting that the inspiration will come when we create the space for it.
It's like we're planting seeds and then allowing them to germinate in their own time.
Oh, I like that.
Rather than constantly digging them up to see if they're growing yet.
That's a beautiful analogy. It reminds me of something else Norms talks about, the importance of embracing imperfection.
Right.
She encourages us to let go of the need to have everything perfect, to be okay with making mistakes, and to see failure as a learning opportunity.
It's about shifting our perspective from seeing failure as a setback. Seeing it as a stepping stone.
Exactly. And that's something that I think is so crucial for creativity.
Yeah.
When we're afraid to fail, we're less likely to take risks, to experiment, to push the boundaries of what's possible.
And that's where real innovation happens, right? When we're willing to step outside our comfort zones and try new things, even if we don't know for sure that they'll work.
Absolutely. And it's about giving ourselves permission to be messy, to be imperfect, to be human.
It's about embracing the whole journey
Yeah.
with all its ups and downs
Yeah.
and trusting that it's all unfolding exactly as it should.
Beautifully said. And I think that's a really powerful message to leave our listeners with today.
Yeah.
The Half-Arse approach isn't about doing less. It's about doing what matters, doing it well enough, and letting go of the rest.
It's about choosing to live a life that feels good, a life that's aligned with our values, and a life that allows us to show up as our best selves, flaws and all.
And it's an invitation to step off the treadmill of hustle culture,
Right.
to create space for rest, reflection, and self-care, and to embrace the journey of becoming who we truly are.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into Half-Arse Human, I want to leave you with one final question to ponder. What would it look like to embrace the Half-Arse approach in your own life? What would it look like to let go of the need for perfection, to set healthy boundaries, to prioritize self-care, and to find joy in those everyday moments? What small step can you take today to move towards a more balanced, joyful, and authentic way of living? Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, and we'll see you next time.